go.
Cinesmack contains spoilers of the spoiling type. If you don't want your spoilers spoiled, please turn back now. Otherwise, enjoy the show!
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds. Lawrence?
Ladies and gentlemen! Welcome to the main event! This is Cinesmack! And the winner is...
Hello, Cinesmacketeers, and welcome to bout number 174 of Cinesmack, the podcast about films by filmmakers. I am your host, Mike Keeler, and joining me tonight is our panel of award-winning judges. First, writer, actor, and director, Kyle Fine.
Hello, everyone. It's a honor and a pleasure to be here tonight with you. Sorry, I Kermit the Frogged a little bit at the end. I apologize.
You did. Second, filmmaker and owner of One Genome Short Productions, Rowald.
Good evening, folks. Nice to be here.
Third, filmmaker and owner of Cheshire Moon Films, Tom Haggis.
Yes, I'm doing method podcasting tonight. I threw my back out, and so I am stuck in this office chair, I think, for the next 4 or 5 days. So I'm really getting into it.
Fourth, filmmaker and owner of Arizona Ink Studios, Andrew Zumwalt.
Hello. That's all I have.
Apparently, Mrs. Doubtfire is over to Andrew's house.
Well, she's been cleaning for the last hour. So.
Oh, gotcha. All right. Well, let's go ahead and poke the monkey and find out what movies we're talking about tonight.
Ladies and gentlemen, Fox fans and Reeve revelers, welcome to the main event. Tonight, 2 big screen biographies give us a window into will in the face of adversity. Will Michael J. Fox make it back in time for triumph? Or will Christopher Reeve fly off with first place? In the first quarter, from 2023, written by Michael J. Fox, directed by Davis Guggenheim, starring Davis Guggenheim, Tracy Pollan, and Michael J. Fox. Still a Michael J. Fox movie. In the second corner from 2024, written by Ian Bonneau, Otto Burnham, and Peter Edegui, directed by Ian Bonneau and Peter Edegui, starring Dana Reeve, Will Reeve, and Christopher Reeve. Superman, the Christopher Reeve story.
Shout out to our monkey himself for he always goes online and watches interviews to make sure he pronounces someone's name correctly. And he and I have a pretty long text thread about this one. Some of the names threw him for a loop, and he was wanting to make sure he didn't make an error. Both these movies, man, you know, I'll just, there's not going to be any trivia tonight, But both these movies really unlocked a lot of things that I had forgotten about both of these men, and how they used their star power to sway the public's eye towards not only what had happened to them, but also shed a light on people that don't have that stardom and trying to help them. I think it's fantastic. So I don't get a vote these rounds, but I think they're both great films.
This was a
So let's go
heavy.
ahead.
These were heavy.
These were very heavy,
Yeah.
very heavy. But yeah, I'm sure you guys are
Don't
gonna.
watch these with don't watch these without your tissue box.
It's true.
You know, yeah.
Let's go ahead and poke the monkey. Or we already poked the monkey. God, I'm off my game. I'm good at this. Let's go to our first round, which is editing.
So, so when I told my wife that we were going to do these two movies up against each other, she kind of cocked her eyebrow and was kind of like why? And assuming that it was just famous people who, you know, had health issues. And in watching these two back to back, there is so many more parallels to this that I think we probably knew going in. I mean, both Christopher Reeve and Michael J. Fox are icons of the 70s and 80s and 90s, and they're, you know, our generation looked up to them, and they were just kind of seen as these flawless actors, not in terms of like their acting abilities, but they're just their personalities, and they were likable, and both of them just skyrocketed to fame on the turn of one role, really. And I think this is probably one of the we've done a couple documentary matchups, and I think this is probably one of the best ones. I mean, I honestly don't know. I don't even really care what the score is going to be at the end. I'm just really excited we get to talk about these two movies. In terms of the editing and, you know, what serves as a writing the story, both of them take a nonlinear approach to it. Michael J. Fox's is a little bit more linear than the Christopher Reeve story, but I think both of them kind of really tell the story really well in terms of you know, using the time structure to, I mean, boost emotion and tell the best story they possibly can. And you know, it's interesting that with the Christopher Reeve story, I mean, for and two very obvious reasons, Christopher Reeve story is really told by, for the most part, other people, with the exception of the excerpts that they used from his audiobook. Whereas Michael J. Fox's story, there were very few interviews with people that weren't Michael J. Fox. That was like really his movie and his way to tell it. And it's amazing that these two stories go down such a similar path and hit some of the same notes in terms of their relationships, and then the politics and the philanthropy. All of them, you know, it hits all of that, but they're told from two very different sides of the story. And I think if it was the other way around, if everyone else was telling the story about Michael J. Fox around him, and we got to hear Christopher Reeve tell his own story, I don't think it would change a whole lot, which I think speaks to the honesty of these two documentaries. So, and I hope that's the case. Yeah. So that's what I can say about editing.
Yeah, and I agree with you. It's very interesting that they both took a very nonlinear kind of approach to the editing. And one of the things that I thought too is that the editing kind of matched for each of these films. The editing kind of matched the personalities of the subjects. The Michael J. Fox documentary the editing was very fast paced. It went at a very quick clip. And I felt like that kind of reflected like how he was, you know, before Parkinson's, and how he still wanted to be after Parkinson's. They are always telling him to slow down, you know, you got to take it easy, slow down. But he wanted to go, go, go. And that's to me, that's how the editing in the film felt. And it felt like it reflected his personality. Whereas the Christopher Reeve one was a little bit more traditional in the editing. It was nonlinear, but it was a little bit, it was a little bit, the pacing was a little bit slower, and it felt like it matched maybe his personality. I'm not sure he was quite as like, he was obviously very athletic and he was go, go, go. But I felt like he had this a little bit, more kind of slower, more elegant personality about him, and that the editing kind of matched him. And I found that interesting that they, when you watch them back to back, basically, you really notice the difference in the pacing.
Yeah. Sorry, I was really
Oh,
fumbling the bag here with my mouse. Not my mouse, my microphone. I was like seriously talking into it and being like, "Oh, no one can hear me."
what?
You're like Scotty from Star Trek 4.
Pretty much.
Hello, computer.
Computer. Okay. Yeah, I agree with some of what you're saying. I liked the structure of both of these documentaries. I thought they were kind of similar looks in that they tried to be a little bit of warts and all documentary where they're talking about some of the shortcomings of their subjects, which you always worry about when you're watching a documentary about a famous person. You know, how much of their private life or controversies or other things like that are they going to touch on? I think it adds a little bit of legitimacy to it if they don't steer away from it. But they did, they're very kind of vague about what those things were. And I'm not sure how much of it was like an earnest reflection on like darker times or not darker times, sorry, like aspects of their personality when they were younger that maybe uh, they weren't so proud of or happy about. I thought that the structure, of course, because of the way Christopher Reeve's story happened chronologically, we know we're not going to get to hear from Christopher Reeves in the present tense. And it took me a long time into the movie, sort of got this sinking feeling like, why is his wife not on camera? Like, I would think she would be there because I didn't know everything about the story. And then later on, I started thinking like, oh, this is gonna take another sad turn, isn't it? But I loved the inclusion of all of Christopher Reeve's children and what they had to say about their father and their family, and I think it was a fairly earnest look at his life, and I think they focused on the important things, um, including, like I said, some of the controversies and the things he may have said or done that riled people up. But it was heartwarming to see someone, and in both of these movies is the case, someone advocating for people who are generally not advocated for, making marginalized communities more visible, bringing attention to them, like using their clout and station in life to try to change things in the world for the better. That's I think that's an amazing thing to watch, and it's hard not to uh, see that be heartwarming. Um, but it also, doesn't shy away from like the devastation that happened in these people's lives and how much stuff changed. I thought the editing in, and I know this is, probably for a later category, but we talked about, the pace of these films, the stoicness and more traditional Christopher Reeves, and then the kind of frantic, all over the place Michael J. Fox. I loved the way they edited in scenes from his movies to give you reaction shots, to give you feelings, to give you, those other things. I thought that was great. I also thought having the director's voice prompting Michael from off camera added a lot because you could see the gears turning and the way he wanted to answer the question. And he's still so sharp and like effortlessly funny and charismatic. I got a
Uh-oh. Kyle's been abducted, or he's fumbling his microphone again.
He needs to.
Kyle, are you there?
Should probably stop
It's on
touching.
talk shows and was so like, what?
You totally cut out.
No. Was it while I was talking about how handsome Michael J. Fox was?
We didn't even hear
Yes,
that,
yes.
but yes.
Okay, well, all I did was pretty much splooge on him for a few more minutes. Even when he was young, he was so effortlessly charismatic, had such good comedic timing, such a
Yes.
good interview, just made you want to sit down and talk to this guy. Like, I would love to just sit down and talk with him. Just shoot the shit. And Christopher Reeve was more like kind of serious, but he wasn't unapproachable. I'd sort of forgotten because Superman is a little bit before my time. Like, I would have been more in line with the Superman 3 and 4 years, but God, he was such a handsome dude, just a chiseled face, such a good-looking guy. And they really are not afraid to then later on show him in like a lot of his lower moments where he's lost a lot of that, and that's so affecting, to see that he's not afraid. They weren't afraid of tackling that head on. And I'm gonna stop now.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with pretty much everything that we've talked about. It's just the editing. It really, I think they both accomplished a story, which sometimes is really difficult with a documentary, especially when you're trying to do a documentary about, a heavy subject. You get into the, I guess, stigma of you're just sharing these other people's stories, and there's really no arc, there's really no message in it. It's just kind of laid out. And I felt that the way that they brought all the pieces together and intertwined, like you said before, how they intertwined their back life, what they did with their current present situation, and with the more current present of Christopher Reeve, as best they could, and a lot of his voiceover, um, to build an actual story and get you to where they wanted you to go, to get a message out there. It wasn't just well, here's a bunch of stuff, cool. So that I felt was really important and really well done, because that's sometimes really hard to do, especially because I'm sure they have, at least with Michael J. Fox, probably thousands of hours of behind the scenes and interviews and all this other crazy stuff that they would get permission for and have to cut in, or just don't know what to do with it, or where do I put it, or is this a good one or is this a bad one. And with Christopher Reeve trying to find all of, there was a lot of home movies and stuff, trying to find some of that stuff, maybe even if it exists, and anything else, just because he was in the 70s and there wasn't a lot as much of that, hey, film everything, shoot all this stuff. And so to be able to pull all that together, I thought was pretty impressive.
Yeah, there was I think there was I don't say a disparity, but there was obviously a lot more home footage for Christopher Reeve than there was for Michael J. Fox.
Yep.
But I mean, but you look at their families, and you're just kind of like, well, that'd be a little bit more understanding why it would be that way, I suppose. But
yeah, and I mean, even like the shots of him like writing, I'm there was only a few of those shots that they had, and I'm betting they just didn't have a lot of it. But they found what they found and they put it in, and I feel that it was effective. It's just Michael J. Fox grew up in an era where a VHS camcorder was a lot easier, even though they didn't, really show a lot of his kid moments, because most of his kid moments were on screen. Christopher Reeve was, his start of his life, and him growing up and developing his family and having that relationship, more of that was caught because he wasn't on screen until his later life either, or later life. And so that changes some of the life moments that you capture as well.
For sure. Yeah, and we do We do this category when we do documentaries. We do this category as editing because, in many ways, the traditional category of writing doesn't really necessarily apply. But I think it does for both of these probably, but more so for still. I thought the writing in that, the voiceover, and Michael J. Fox's, what he was saying on screen, I felt like that was very well written. Like it was very well thought out and very well written. And it also makes you realize, though, that these are documentaries, but you shouldn't probably never think of, in most cases, a documentary as being unbiased, because they're definitely still telling a story, and they're still telling a story from a certain perspective, and in many cases, it still has some bias, because I think Kyle mentioned, they didn't get into maybe some of the darker moments and that kind of thing, and maybe that's because the subjects of the documentary didn't really want to get into that and talk about those things. So it's maybe not entirely unbiased, but it's and it makes you realize that it is still kind of written, whether it's actually written on a page or if it's written in a way in the editing room.
To their credit, I will say that Michael J. Fox seemed very honest about his drinking.
Oh yeah,
And
everything.
being an asshole.
And being an
Yeah.
asshole. And then
I
Christopher
agree.
Reeve
And his drug problem.
and the part about like the diary from Dana Reeve, where she had talked about holding the towels. Like, I mean, I'm sure they had a long conversation about this is, these are my mom's private moments and that kind of thing, but whether or not to put it in there. So
Sure.
I get that. And yes, there's definitely bias.
Beautiful piece of writing too. That was
but it's
such an
yeah.
affecting
But
piece of
even
writing, yeah.
but even when he first had the accident and he's sitting there and they had brought up, he was trying to make a decision of whether or not is it worth it? Is it worth to go on?
Mhm.
And so
Right.
I would
Right.
say that even those moments, those are the real moments. Those are the moments that most people don't see. And I think they even talked a little bit about that later in that film of, you can go, well, even with Michael J. Fox, I was thinking the same thing, you can go and hang out with them for a day or an hour or, a couple of days and get this experience with them and share moments or go to an event with them or whatever. But you're not seeing the day to day where, Christopher Reeve has to have somebody rub his arms for an hour. Otherwise it'll swell up and fall off. You're not seeing that. You're not seeing the Michael J. Fox that, has trouble doing what you would take for granted, grabbing a glass of water without breaking it, without falling down. And I think they address that in a sensitive way as best they could with still telling the story. Because, I mean, there was even a moment where the director said something about, you never mentioned, are you in pain? And he was like, well, you never, it never came up. I'm not going to start with that. Why would I bring that up? And he's like, well, because I think it's important. And are you in pain? He's like, yes, I'm in pain a lot. And so I think those moments are there. I think they're more candid than they are with just some of the, I guess what you would call scripted voiceover, but, to getting that story.
Yeah.
All right, boys, let's put it to a vote. Start off with you, Tom.
I think I will go with Christopher Superman.
All right. Kyle.
I'm going to go with still.
Andrew.
I'm also going to go still.
And Gabe.
Yeah, because of the pacing of it and some of the writing, I'm going to go with still as well.
All right. Well, there's no trivia as I stated earlier. So we will just move right along into our second round, which is subject matter.
Okay. Always got to wait for a minute just to make sure if it's quiet, then I know it's me. Um, yeah, subject matter. So I guess I'm kind of talking about the actor, what happens around them, and how we feel about what was included in the documentary, leaving out the things that they didn't include. Although I guess we can touch on that a bit. But let's start with Christopher Reeve because it's the movie I watched the first. Sorry. Uh, I loved the inclusion of the Superman statue heading up during the good times, heading down during the bad times, being covered in kryptonite, during the worst times. And I especially loved when it swings around and the nebula or gas cloud behind it forms his red cape. I thought that was very cool. Um, some of the rarer footage, the artistic, on stage footage of him doing stretching and movement exercises, I found very interesting to include and kind of show you that he viewed himself as a serious actor, a serious person in the craft, and was given this incredible opportunity to play Superman, and how that is or was in the 70s and 80s a double-edged sword of, well, now you're Superman, no one will take you seriously as anything else, and also his desire to be a respected actor. And you hear it from the very beginning that he wants to take on many challenging roles that are in completely different avenues of uh, Superman. And I would say you kind of hear, and I think evidence would back it up, that a lot of those were failures. So he had one big role and became typecast as Superman, and that was very hurtful to him. Rather than like enjoying the success of it, he wanted to be taken seriously as an actor, and I think you can feel that when he talks about Marlon Brando, how disappointed he was that he had a chance to be this amazing actor and guide other people, and just completely did not respect him for the work he didn't put in. Um, I love the interview subjects they picked. They were so varied, and all of them had such, I think, interesting and poignant things to say. Jeff Daniels is a great interview. He was awesome. Whoopi Goldberg, Glenn Close, all of his kids did a great job articulating things. They were not afraid to share the bad parts, and you felt like genuine emotion from them. I thought that all aided very well the storytelling. I love the archival footage. Um, I just thought it's very well put together, and it is sort of a more stoic story about how family trauma gets filtered through one layer, and you just try not to pass it on as bad to your children as you got it from above. That's something I've experienced in my own personal life. So that was a very affecting and interesting look at, like, you want to do the best and be the opposite of all the things that you've hated about your childhood, and you end up hopefully landing somewhere in between and doing less harm to the people below you, right? That seems to be the general outcome from what I've seen. The Michael J. Fox story, I loved its frenetic pace. I liked I thought it was very heartwarming, the seeing the flip side of that, where you have a very pragmatic family, but who wanted to support his dream and his talent and idea. And that was awesome to see that. And when you see his early work, they show, you can tell right away that he has whatever it is. He has comedic timing, and he has acting chops. He has all the things you would need to eventually become a star. And the happenstance of Back to the Future falling in his lap, and all those times he worked so many hours on Family Ties and then doing that, and he thought he was going to do a terrible job. And then in the end, look at Back to the Future, he's incredible in it. And he was great as Alex P. Keaton. Like, he is a famously talented actor. And just has something about him that I don't think really you can teach, or if you can, it's very difficult and it's very rare. Uh, the candid interviews with him, I love that they don't just show him during his more good and lucid moments. They show the struggles, they show the differences between the good and bad. You get a lot of scenes of him trying to practice his walk. You get, and he approaches all these things that you look at from the outside and you wonder, like, oh man, could I handle that, or handle that happening to someone that I love? That seems so devastating. And one of the first things where he walks out of his apartment or house, wherever he is in New York, and walks down the street too fast and ends up falling, and just makes a joke about how the woman knocked him off his feet. Like, that's just like amazing. His ability to handle that with grace and humor, and make someone who's concerned about him immediately. And he just seems so resilient and tough, and like he talks about that growing up, scrappy, and having to run or fight or whatever because he was getting picked on. I had a similar upbringing, but it was because I was overweight, not because I was small. So you either made him laugh or you didn't fit in. And I think that's why I developed a sense of humor very early in my life, was to avoid those situations that I was finding myself in. But man, yeah, I liked both these movies. I think they did a great job exploring their subjects, presenting them in ways that, featured and highlighted their story and didn't detract from it. And I especially got to give a shout out to the editing, the pace that works with the voiceover for Michael J. Fox, as they're going through the stages in his career, especially the series where he's doing double duty on Family Ties and Back to the Future. That is an amazing sequence of film where he's talking about the Teamster drivers coming in, and I mean, they're cutting in these shots. I thought it was just great.
I think that, I mean, when we talk about subjects, like, it seems like it's like we're kind of talking about, like, is this a worthy subject? And I think both of these very much are, um, because I mean, since we're doing this kind of in the place of actors, it's just, yeah, I don't even really know how to, like, kind of rank this one. I don't. I mean, have you guys even thought about who you'd vote for at this point, or?
Yeah, but it's hard because they're both beloved actors and
And they're both
both
stories
seem
worth
to
telling.
be,
Yeah,
for sure, yeah, but not only worth telling, but important to
right.
tell,
I would
I
agree.
think. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because we always, we hold these people up as, especially in Christopher Reeve's case, as heroes or idols, and we see them as something maybe more than human. They've transcended normal humanity, and that they are somehow, and then when we see them, suffer with these conditions, then we realize that they are human. But then when we see them go through this and the way they handle it with such aplomb and with such, like Kyle said, grace and dignity and strength, then they become true heroes. They really become heroes to us and other people like them and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, I think these are, it is going to be hard to pick because I think these were both beloved actors. And in the end, they had their good times, they had their bad times, but really, you know, upstanding and good people in the end. So this round is going to be tough. It's going to be, it's going to be hard to decide.
I guess my comparison, when you say, that we see their struggle and how they take it with a grain of salt, and it turns around that perception. I think of all of the people that we don't see, that aren't famous, that are paraplegics or that have Parkinson's, that are going through this every single day. And because they're not, an actor or a famous singer or whatever, how they struggle, how they are dealing with it. And to me, it hopefully is also a reflection with how Michael J. Fox is handling Parkinson's, how Christopher Reeve handled being a paraplegic, and how these other people hopefully are being able to gain courage and strength from these stories, and that their struggle maybe is just a little bit easier and doesn't quite hurt them as much as it was before these stories were told. And that's why I think both of these stories are super important. Um, I I find it to be interesting that we have two very, as we said, beloved character actors from our generation growing up, and new generations enjoying these movies now, and characters, and seeing that they are completely different actors, they are completely different people. They became to fame in completely different ways, and yet they both ended up with a lifelong struggle and persevered in the same way. So it's interesting to see these two completely opposite life people end up actually sharing something more in common than anything else. Um, and that's, a they were dealt a shitty hand, and they persevered on top of that. And I think that that says something to both of these people and to that subject that was decided to tell these stories. So, yeah.
I think that's a very interesting point to bring up, because even though they are different people with different sensibilities, um, different backgrounds, different attitudes, they both persevere in the face of these struggles. And I know, as a born straight white male, I take for granted a lot the importance of representation, and how isolating being disabled or feeling ashamed or underlooked, or marginalized in society, how difficult and painful that can be. And to watch these actors use their platforms not only to advocate, but also to say, I also am a person who struggles with this, and I want everybody to know there are many others out there who don't have the platform that I have, who struggle with this, and they deserve dignity and resources, and society should, care for them and not ostracize them. I think that's a very important and heartwarming lesson to take away from these, is that we don't have to be in their situation to advocate for people like this. And I think it makes it more likely that, people will be open to advocating for these types of movements and changes, from seeing documentaries like this, because maybe they're being uh, made aware of how prevalent these things are for the first time. And I think all of that is good for progressing the causes of improving the lives of people struggling with these afflictions.
Yeah, I mean, it's more than just like telling their story, isn't it? It's also furthering their cause,
Mhm.
to get paralysis and Parkinson's, to keep it at the forefront of people's attention. But then it's also a story of resilience. I mean, the amount of goodwill, and how many times people are, after watching these, are going to bite their tongue when something goes wrong, which is like, yeah, but there are other people who have it a lot worse. And so uh, it kind of just hits on so many different levels, and they're both just really really impressive films.
Yeah, and I would say that on top of saying that they're impressive films, I would say they are vastly impressive people. And it's not just Michael J. Fox and Christopher Reeve. It's also, you know, their kids and the people that surround themselves with those who they've surrounded themselves with and their families. Because, you know, the movies were both very much focused on Christopher Reeve or Michael, but you look at, you know, all the stuff, you know, we saw as kids a little bit for Michael J. Fox. Christopher Reeve, they're a little bit more involved, obviously, because he's no longer with us. But, you know, imagine the struggles and the strength that they've had to develop over the years to be able to deal with this with their fathers and the struggle that they would go through. That to me is, you know, that's one more step outside of these guys are amazing, but so are the people that are around them.
Yeah, it's definitely you know what brings into the light is the support group that are around those people.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. So let's put it to a vote, boys. Kyle.
Oh, I didn't know I'd go first. I'm gonna go with Superman. Super slash
Okay.
man.
All right. Andrew.
Superman this round.
Gabe.
Well, I found Michael J. Fox very charismatic and funny, and he was a fun subject to interview. So I'm going to go with Still.
All right. And Tom.
I did know Kyle was going to go first, and I'm going to go with Still.
So did I. Because it's the same order every time.
I know. I seem to not learn this goldfish memory.
Well, good luck to you in our 17th year that you figured out.
Oh God.
All right,
We
let's
can
move
start.
on.
We can start comparing rated R movies next year.
All right.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's move on to our third round, which is directing.
Yeah, so this gets a lot into what we've talked about before with the editing. You know, the director has a clear-cut story that they are hoping to tell. And in a documentary, sometimes you're going to get that story, and sometimes you're not. And other times you get a completely different story that you're not expecting in the first place. I have a feeling that for some of these, the story that was delivered for both of these was exactly what the director wanted. But as viewers, I don't feel that we knew everything that was going to happen in both of these men's lives. There were things that I learned about both of these actors by watching these movies. You know, these directors had a way of pulling out some amazing things that I would say are lesser known, you know, peering behind the curtain, as it were, when it comes to telling these two stories. You know, Michael J. Fox having to do Family Ties and Back to the Future, as we mentioned, pretty much at the exact same time with, you know, a couple hours of sleep for weeks on end. Maybe not a lot of people knew that he was doing both of those. Maybe people didn't actually know that he had been diagnosed and was having tremors and taking medication while he was filming quite a few episodes of Spin City, and always had something in his left hand to help prevent himself from having tremors or shaking uncontrollably. You know, some of his how he grew up, where he basically didn't have a direct childhood. He grew up on screen. He grew up, you know, as this nice, pretty boy that everyone, you know, girls swooned, and he was the teenage love. I mean, look at like things like Secret of My Success and Doc Hollywood and Teen Wolf, and I mean, all these crazy 80s and 90s movies that were just amazing. And then you hear stories of him talking about, yeah, I was an alcoholic. Yes, I take probably more of these pills than I probably should. I've done stupid things. I was an asshole for a lot of times, which is funny because I keep hearing that quote from Back to the Future in my head, where Back to the Future 3, where he's like, he's an asshole. And I keep thinking it's funny because he admits, he's like, yeah, I was kind of a dick. I know I was. And it's kind of interesting to see that curtain being pulled back by these directors, by these storytellers, to really get in there. With Christopher Reeve, for example, again, we've all, we talked about putting him on a pedestal. He was Superman. Everyone knew him as Superman. Those beady blue eyes. He would fly into space right at the camera, and those blue eyes would just light up the screen. And people were like, oh, he is the epitome of Superman. And that's what people knew him as. But then you start hearing these stories of how, his one son talks about, he's like, I never really saw him. I think he was there once when I was born, and then the rest of the time he was never around. I was pretty much alone. I didn't also know that he was such close friends with Robin Williams, which I thought was a fascinating twist, because I had no idea that that was a thing, and was pleasantly surprised to see those two, and yet a little shaken by Glenn Close's comment about how she believes that Robin Williams would still be alive if Christopher Reeve hadn't died. That they fed off each other. They were their own life support for each other. That bond, I had no idea that it was like that. Things like that, pulling some of that stuff back, seeing some of the things that you don't expect to see from someone that you have in your mind, whether it be the Michael J. Fox teen heartthrob or the Christopher Reeve Superman type moments in his life. I thought one of the most interesting interviews about that was, Christopher Reeve had said, I'm not Superman. I played a part. I'm not him. But the Pope, or he would have priests call him and be like, what is your stance? You got to worry about your humanity. What do you think about that? Because you're Superman. And he's like, I make mistakes. I'm just a man. And I found that to be really fascinating, how quickly the world made Superman Christopher Reeve, and that it wasn't Christopher Reeve actually playing the part of Superman. I found that to be interesting. So the directors pulled out, I think, more than just a story of love and loss and disabilities and all of the progression and the power that they are giving out to the world. But they also shed a light into these two people who, they were just people who have families, who have lives, who are doing the best that they can, just like we are. And it's super important to see some of that sometimes for these people that we have personified into something else. So I feel like the directors really got that across in both of these movies, and find that to be very powerful.
Yeah, we don't really hear much from the director. I don't think ever in Superman.
We do not.
Like,
I don't think he speaks at all.
But
I think it's all just Christopher Reeve.
Yeah. But the director in Still is included in the audio, and he's Michael J. Fox's reactions, which seem very candid and honest. I mean, he seems like to be at that place in his life where he's not trying to bullshit anybody or save public face or anything like that. Like, he wants his story told before he can't tell it, And they really show the struggle that he deals with on a daily basis. And, they talk about how many times he's getting injured and all the surgeries he has to do because he walks too fast and can't control himself. And, like he has moments where parts of his body just seize up and stop cooperating and, falls, breaks his face, breaks his arm, tears something in his shoulder, like over and over again. Most of the movie, he's got a bandage, a sling. He's got makeup on his face because he's covering a black eye. Like that especially hit home with me because for some of us, I don't know if anybody else can relate, but maybe people listening can. You see some of that stuff happen as your parents get older. Like you notice, like, oh, you got bruises on your hands, or what happened? Did you fall and hurt yourself? And then, be like, yeah, I was doing this or that, and I fell, and I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to worry. And then you're like, oh man. So for me, that was very emotional to see that stuff because I kind of deal with a little bit of that in my life. But the way it's intercut the moments they choose for still showing his good moments, his bad moments, combined with his good moments and bad moments, outside of the documentary, tying that into his acting performances and that I thought was really slick filmmaking and a great way to propel the story forward and have it keep momentum. Using some of the sound effects, from Back to the Future and things like that, I thought was a fun callback. I just did a great job of tying this story into his life and this being everything about Michael J. Fox, the good, the bad, and the ugly, everything that has happened in his life from, beginning to where we're at today. And the Christopher Reeve movie is different there, of course, because we're using archival footage, interview footage, and we don't have two of the main protagonists in the story around anymore to tell their side. So you're hearing what's distilled down from friends and family, and they did a great job picking a supporting cast and people to tell that story about who Christopher Reeve was and how much he was respected and liked by his peers and the close relationships he had, but also the struggles he had with his own childhood and the way he parented his children or didn't parent his children in places and the way he struggled with commitment and his issues with his father. And I dealt with a lot of that, but then later on watching, this sort of metamorphosis into going from this lowest low of like, being paralyzed from everything from your shoulders down to deciding that it wasn't going to stop him from telling stories he wanted to tell, continuing even to act in another movie, advocating for people in a similar position to him. And that kind of stuff is a double-edged sword for me because it's great to watch them do that. Like it's truly inspiring for humanity. It also on a personal level makes me feel very lazy and question what I'm doing with my life because I don't face these challenges these people face and they're doing so much. And I think in a way it's motivating to watch and go like, okay, look, if someone's struggling with basically C4, C5, whatever, complete spinal cord injury, could go on and have this sort of life, continue to be a parent, continue to be a storyteller, continue to be an advocate, then a lot of the excuses I make for why I can't do what I do are really just invalid, or they're not. They are excuses in the sense that I'm just using them to get out of doing something I otherwise could do. So I think they're inspiring in one way in that they show that your life doesn't end after a tragedy and there are lots of ways to approach your difficulties, but also that just because something terrible or unforeseen happens to you doesn't mean it has to be the end of your, doesn't mean it has to put the brakes on your life. Like you can find ways to continue to live as rich and fulfilling a life as you can and make a difference in the world. And so for both of those, these movies are A plus, knock it out of the park in that way.
I want to just talk real quick about the so when you do a documentary like this, and I mean any kind of time you really do a documentary, you need B-roll. Um, And I think both of these took, and we've talked a little bit about this, but we took two different paths to it. I mean, Christopher Reeve obviously really loved his home video camera and documented lots, and there was tons of footage, I'm sure, for um, the editors to go through. Michael J. Fox, it seemed there was a lot less behind the scenes footage that they could use. There were instances where there was some stuff that was, I mean, like for his audition of Family Ties, I know a lot of that stuff was kind of piecemeal together from different footage and possibly different seasons and read throughs and that kind of thing. In one shot, everything it's flipped backwards, so it looks like the audition is looking to the right, but they like flipped it so that they wanted to make sure that they were looking the right way to keep the continuity. But the other thing that Guggenheim did was they created a lot of B-roll. They went through a lot of pains to recreate moments, especially the scenes when they were talking about the Michael J. Fox working Back to the Future and Family Ties at the same time, or the first time his pinky started trembling. There was a lot of those moments in the life where they just made dramatizations of it. And as someone who's gone through lots and lots of archival footage to put stuff together, I can't really decide which way I would rather do it, because if if you're not true, if you don't do your diligence in recreating a scene, I mean, it could be worse than not having anything at all. So I don't know, if it put it to you guys, would you rather dig through archival footage or create the stuff from scratch?
I think it would be time consuming, enormously time consuming to go through archival footage.
And I think both are, though, right?
They're both.
Yeah, I'm
both,
sure. Well, I'm sure. Yeah.
I thought they did a good job with both the actor or body double or whatever you had for Michael J. Fox in those recreations shared like a similar energy and size and look that you could suspend your disbelief that you were watching a little bit, basically like a retelling of it. But and they also used some interesting ideas about, like some of the symptoms he was having, showing the close-up of his pinky twitching, the feeling of something fluttering on his face that he couldn't, understand what it was. And I thought they did a great job with both, because they also used a lot of archival footage to basically get old Michael J. Fox reactions to what him or other people were saying about him, which I thought was a very interesting approach to do that.
Yeah,
but yeah,
and I thought it was interesting.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I thought it was interesting how they would talk about his symptoms and how he was hiding them, and then they would show footage from one of his old shows, and you could see it. Like, you might not notice if you didn't know, but but he would talk about it, and he would talk about it, what he would do, like, fidget with that hand and do those things, and then they would show some footage from one of his shows, and you're like, oh my God, it's totally there. But you wouldn't notice it unless they kind of brought it to your attention. And I just wanted to say in this directing round really quick, because I know we're over our time limit, I just wanted to say really quick, I liked how involved the director was in still the Michael J. Fox. He didn't let Michael J. Fox off the hook. He talked to him. He he asked him important questions and dug in a little bit further. And I really liked how the director was involved in this case.
I would agree.
Yes, I agree, but I think, I mean, we talked about this with like My Kid Could Paint That. When does the documentarian become part of the story?
Yep.
Right.
And Davis Guggenheim has on more than one occasion been accused of that, and that he has injected himself into a story that he really doesn't have any place being a part of. And
sure. Well, even Martin Scorsese has done that.
But
but
do we feel that he did much, like, because like I said, the one notable one is the one we talked about earlier when he asked him, are you in pain, and how come you didn't share that? Like, I think that's a legit question, but doesn't necessarily derail the story.
No, it doesn't. And that's part of it too. Like you can't just have Michael J. Fox's reaction.
Right.
Can't cut out Davis's voice. You don't know what he's talking about. I've done lots of interviews with brides and grooms, and there are scenes where I have to put my question. You have to hear me off camera, or you have no idea what they're talking about, because some people don't speak in that, hey, put the question and the answer, formula that we're taught in third grade. It's just, it becomes a conversation. And when you have it's kind of the sign of a casual conversation. And that's kind of a sign of success of a documentarian, that you got your subject to relax to that level.
Yep.
But at the same time, it becomes a back and forth, and you kind of need both sides to get to deliver the complete idea. So I get it both ways.
I also wanted to point out that I felt that both of these movies were at least edited or directed in the same manner, because they both had they would show now with Christopher Reeve's kids talking about something, and then they would show backstory, and then they would talk about how that made them feel and where they are now, and then it would go. And they did the same thing with Michael J. Fox. So I thought that was interesting that they had a similar cut in that sense.
Yeah, it kept a continuity of things flowing through and kept you on pace for where you were at in the story.
Yep. And they would go back and they would say something, and then they would show some stuff, and then they would go back and be like, so, it was kind of how did that make you feel in that moment? And I thought that was interesting that both did the same thing. But
I did not know that Davis Guggenheim was married to Elizabeth Shue. I just found that out. So
ooh, no, me either.
I didn't know that either. There is some trivia, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he must really like Back to the Future if he married Jennifer.
And Christopher Reeve, he has really, really strong genes, because his son,
no kidding,
both sons, and his even his half brother. I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, we're watching that.
I agree.
Because I was like, that must be his brother, and then they're like half brother, and I'm like, that's his half. Holy crap!
Yeah.
The Reeve genes are strong.
Yes, they are.
Yeah. Super genes.
His youngest son looks exactly like him.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Watching the new Superman.
Well, even
movie,
Barack Obama said that.
Yeah.
He's in the new Superman movie, and there's this as the TV reporter, and just kind of like, hey, it's Superman. Is up to you.
Oh, he is.
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that. I missed it.
Yeah, before that.
Probably because I didn't know. I watched the Superman movie, the newest Superman movie, before I watched the Superman documentary.
Yeah,
so I probably missed it.
Yep, he is.
That's cool.
To answer your question about going through archival or doing reenactments, I think
I don't care about your opinion on the matter.
Okay, well, let's move on to voting.
Oh my God, go ahead.
No, it's fine.
No. Now I want to know.
Whatever. I was going to pout all night.
I want to know.
No, I'm not going to pout. You want to know? Okay, Andrew. I think there's a place for both. Honestly, I think there's a place for both. I mean, I've worked on a few documentaries where you have no choice but to do a reenactment. If it is vital to your story, if you need to show something, or if you want to put the audience in that place, then yes, do a reenactment. Totally. But also, if there is footage to show the feeling of what you're trying to come across, use that. I mean, there's places for that, and I've said this before many times when we've done documentaries, and Tom even brought it up. He did all these mini documentaries once a weekend for how many years, Tom?
15.
Like 15 years. Yeah. There's a certain way you get used to doing it. Like, what you need to hit, where you need to take it. And that's when you're getting into director mode, whether it be doing a documentary about someone's wedding day, or doing a documentary about someone turning around and advocating for a group of people. You you have to start to question, like, okay, could we do reenactments? Is it possible to get this footage? Is it possible to go out and shoot footage with this person? All these, come to the forefront, and you have to make those choices. But I can say to you that the reenactments can be lengthy, and it can be difficult, because you have to find the right setting. You have to find the right actors. You have to light it. You have to shoot it. If there's going to be audio in it, you have to. There's all this stuff that you have to think about. It's just like directing a scene in a movie, except you're doing it for a documentary, and you are trying to get all these pieces correct. And maybe it's even a little bit more nerve wracking sometimes, because you're trying to get specific, very specific things
But
to be true to the story of that person, and not just a fun Indiana Jones movie.
but I think what
I was gonna say, because it's a documentary, and you're dealing, you're like, we have to get this visual to go with this audio,
Right?
and it's got to like hit the certain tone. It's got to have this certain match with the narrative film. You're making. I mean, you're not making it up as you go along, but the story's not been told before. So with the documentary, you would need to hit those points and those emotional points and look, and it needs to match really close with what's in your head. A lot of times with narrative films, you don't get that. You don't get exactly what was in your head. So, it's hard.
But
some days I'd rather just dig through archive footage.
But I mean, I think still though, when he did it the most was for the stories that Michael J. Fox was telling, that there would have never been footage for ever.
Yes.
Like him waking up, him going from his apartment to the 2 different sets and coming home. There's never going to be footage for that. Reenacting that, which I'm sure was not a true reenactment of it all, like when he walks down in between the 2 trailers and the guys are dressing him and he grabs the video camera and then steps on, I'm sure that didn't actually happen. But
and not that way, not that look, but it gets the point across.
Correct. And it was kind of a little montage that they did that I think helped illustrate a little bit of the story that would have just been Michael J. Fox telling this 2-minute story.
Right.
And I think it added that. Sorry, we are way over. I know.
Yeah, we are way over. And I'm going to take it way over one more time. Tom brought up, putting your question in your answer.
Yep.
I will say this, and you don't realize how good a person is at being interviewed until you interview someone who does not like being on camera.
Yep.
Period. Because that all goes away. Right? You could have a super easy interview with someone like, great, this is, you made my job easy today. And then you go and I'm not, these people just are not used to being on camera. I am not saying that they're a bad set of people, but farmers. I've interviewed a lot of farmers for different things. And my favorite thing is, sample question here. Would you recommend this seed to any of your friends or your family? Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. I would 100% expect
and that's all you get. And you're like, okay, well, moving on. So just know that that's very important. If you are ever interviewed, if you are listening to this and you are ever interviewed, remember to put the question in your answer. It makes the editors very, very, very happy.
Yep.
And if you're conducting an interview, don't ask yes, no questions.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
We can work together and get through this.
Yep. All right. Andrew.
This round would be still.
All right. Gabe.
In this instance, I liked how the director inserted himself into the interviews to elicit more from Michael J. Fox, so I'm also going to go with still.
All right. Tom.
I'm going with still, but for my own personal reasons.
All right, Kyle.
I'll go with Superman. For I'm not explaining it either.
Well, fine. Don't explain it. All right, fourth and final round. Overall,
Well, I'm not sure there's much else that can be said about these documentaries, but I think we can try. We did go over quite a bit on that last round. There's obviously a lot to discuss about these, but I think one thing we haven't touched on too much. I think maybe Kyle mentioned it. Maybe it was Kyle mentioned it a little bit earlier. Is these stories are about these actors, Michael J. Fox, Christopher Reeve, but really the true heroes of these stories are their wives and the women and the families that supported them and continue to support them through these extremely troubling times. And so I think that's one of the threads that I think is subtle and understated in both of these films, is that how lucky were these men to have women like that? Because, geez, you could be justified in saying, no, I don't know if I can deal with this. I don't know if I have the strength. I don't know if I can do this, and just bail out. But neither of them did that, and they were extremely supportive and have become, in at least in Michael J. Fox's instance, they have become advocates. Or I mean, Christopher. Well, I guess not Christopher Reeve's case, but they're advocates for their continued, support and philanthropy and of these conditions and the foundations that these men created. And these women are ultimately just like, they're supremely important in these stories, and they get some they get some screen time, obviously, but I think it's really understated in these. And we see that the main subjects as being movie stars and people we know, but it's really their families and their wives that are super important. And I think that's another message that these documentaries can relay to people. They relay hope, and they relay this message: you need to rely on the people you love.
I just want to real quick. One of the problems I had, I guess, with Still, and this, I mean, this is nitpicking. They're both very good documentaries, but some of the music choices I felt thematically were okay, but I feel like if you're telling doing a documentary, especially with like 80s and 90s, I mean, people are really specific about how music fits into our timeline as pop culture. And it was a little weird to hear, like, when they did Welcome to the Jungle, and it was like 1986, and the whole time I'm like, we weren't listening to that song at that time. And they played Sabotage kind of out of order of where it is in the timeline. And there were plenty of, I mean, hundreds of great songs that came out, in during those times. And I just felt like, I don't know. I just felt like some of the music choices kind of threw me off because time-wise they didn't fit with the time. Does that even make any sense? I don't know. Maybe
Yeah, they're a little anachronistic for the time they're setting their story in. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think they kind
unnecessarily
of
so.
chose the music maybe more for its vibe and feeling and what it brought than, its timely relevance. I liked the orchestral score during the Christopher Reeve documentary because I think it's very fitting. The John Williams music to Superman is iconic, like almost every piece of music he's ever done, obviously, but it really stands out, and using that style fit that movie so well because it was presented about his rise and change into Superman, and then bring struggling with that identity, which I think is interesting when you think about his dual lives as Clark Kent and Superman, and then also, sort of what comes after a tragedy and a disaster. So I liked the music choices in both movies. I agree they were a little, maybe jarring, and you felt like a little, that song doesn't exactly fit this, but I think they were kind of chosen maybe for more their tone and energy they brought than being on the money with the timeline wise. Like, why not use like a bunch of Huey Lewis? Are they not on good terms anymore? I mean, that'd be a lot of fun. But yeah, Gabe, I just want to touch on your point there. They did do a lot in the Christopher Reeve movie that I think they feel like they talked more about Diane Reeves. I'm sorry, I can't remember
I think
her
it's
name
Dana.
off the top of my head. Dana, okay.
Dana.
Reeve, yeah.
And just how, incredibly strong and what a presence she was for the family, and how she never quit in her pursuit of making their lives as good as they could be, and also helping to improve the lives of others. I mean, that is truly remarkable. If you made a documentary called Superwoman and just changed the names and talked about her, I think you could tell this story from a different point of view, and Christopher Reeve would be a big part of it. But she certainly could, you could make that documentary with everything that she accomplished. It was sad to see the ending of the film when you find out kind of what her ultimate fate is. It seems very unfair, right? Like a lot of this does, but I think their legacy of what they accomplished lives on in the work that their foundation continues to do, and the children that they raised, right? That's sort of the legacy they left behind, and that's impressive. I think anyone would have to say that's impressive. One of the things I loved about the Michael J. Fox documentary, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, is how he was so vulnerable and allowed himself to be shown, struggling. And that's something that actors who we usually think of as struggling with vanity and public perception and their persona and their brand, I guess, if you will, are almost uniquely unwilling to do. And so he talks about his efforts to hide and protect this secret of his because he didn't want to lose his opportunities at what he had and the thing that he knew. But then, he decided to come public with it. And I think that changed a lot of people's lives for the good who were dealing with it in silence. And that's an incredibly powerful thing. Well, I think one of the most valuable things you can have in the attention, have people's attention, you can get a message across. Doesn't matter how well articulated or logical your argument is, if no one's listening, it won't move the needle. So having these people with huge star power, name recognition, get out there and advocate for marginalized, lesser served people, people we tend to overlook or pity, or we have misinformed perceptions of. I think that's an incredibly powerful thing for all of society to change the narrative on those things. And Christopher Reeve and Michael J. Fox are living that, lived it. They didn't let these things stop them. They persisted in the face of them, and they showed what was possible. Granted, as we spoke about and they talk about it in the Christopher Reeve film, they're luckier than a lot of people who deal with these situations. They have money and resources.
Yeah.
They have a support system, which some people simply don't have.
But it shows that they are taking that, like all the donations and the money that they are raising, to turning that around and giving it back to the people that actually do need it. And even there at the end, after Christopher Reeve had passed away, they donated the van to the what was it, the 14-year-old boy who he couldn't go anywhere. And
yep.
So yes, they potentially have an opportunity for better care, but the fact that they're not just taking that for granted and they're turning around and getting donations, or they're building X, Y, or Z so they can take the next step to give away whatever they need to. And I think speaks volumes for it's not just a platform of word service. They're actually trying to, bring some of that good as much as they possibly can by using their platform. Um, and unfortunately, with uh, Dana dying, it's amazing to see all three of his kids in the Reeves family immediately take over the board for the Christopher Reeve Foundation. Like, that's like the fact that that has been instilled in them so much, and they are as passionate as their father and their mother was, is speaks volumes for that family and what they went through and what they, you know, had created as a person for themselves to be able to say, yes, I'm carrying on this legacy. I want to continue to make a difference for other people, and I'm going to continue it by doing this. That's not a lot of people have that kind of drive. Not a lot of people, especially kids, say, I want to do what my dad was doing or what my mom was doing because it made a difference and I'm going to do that. And so that, I thought that was pretty incredible.
Yeah, I agree, and it is amazing to see, and again, like I said before, the strength of these families and the support they show each other,
Mm-hmm.
and they're blended families too.
Yep.
But they're like, you know, they're as close as any other family would be, and yeah, it really is, inspirational and motivating. And and I think we talked about how like these people have extra resources that other people would never have to deal with these things. But I think they've leveraged those resources in the right ways. They can afford treatments and things that other people might not be able to afford, but they've taken their fame, they've taken that money, and they've used it to try to help those people who don't have those resources. And um, it really is an amazing thing to see.
An unintended consequence of the Christopher Reeve documentary was how sad I was that John Kerry didn't get a chance to be president at some point, because I thought he was awesome in that and seemed to genuinely care and show like real sympathy for this. And I just thought that was interesting to include him, and maybe it just hits home harder now because of what we face now in American politics. But seeing what feels like genuine empathy and interest from a politician is so rare that it is remarkable when you see it. You're like, oh, well, maybe not every one of them of all time have sucked, but yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, and
It's sad that you have
yeah,
to
it was
say
interesting.
that.
Yeah, it is a little bit sad because you would think, well, no, that's not true. Yeah, I was going to say you'd think that politics would, you'd like to think that politics would actually attract people like that who do have empathy and do want to
Who
do
care
things
about
for others.
who care about human nature?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that I always felt like that politics was like a job of service, and you were in service to your constituents and other, you know, people in your country, and that you would have to have a certain level of, empathy and be service oriented in order to be a good politician. But that's just nonsense. That's not true at all.
Yeah. The
That's
difference is
wishful thinking at the very least. So
I like
difference
to
is
think that I if I can interject, I like to think
go
that
ahead.
there are some of them out there that do
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
go
No, I'm
into
sure
it
there are. Yeah.
with
Yeah.
high hopes and are advocates. Um, the problem is, I think the grind of especially on national level just takes it out of you. It takes away
Mm-hmm.
all your fucks to give, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you only get the strong sometimes that pull through and actually do advocate for something that would truly help their constituents or everyone.
Yeah, and it's
Right.
politics is also unfortunately a game. You know, it's
Yes.
one of the more interesting interviews I saw was with Tom Morello, who's the guitar player for Rage Against the Machine. He has a political
Mm-hmm.
science degree from Harvard. Incredibly smart guy. Went to work right out of college for a Democratic governor or senator hopeful in the office, working in his staff. And that was the first and only time he ever worked in politics, because he said when he started to see the compromises being made, I mean, he was what we're talking about, you know, like idealistic, wanted to make a
Idealistic. Yeah.
difference, wanted to support
Mm-hmm.
somebody who made a difference. Then you see all the compromises getting made, the corners being cut, the deals with the devil you have to make to get anything done. He just was like, nope, I don't want any part of this. So I think what you think a politician should be and what they end up being are two very different things.
All right.
I agree. But it was interesting to see how many on
Yeah.
both sides, how many of their friends were actually politicians.
So
How many politicians they knew.
before we officially end this round, I found a quote that I want to share with you guys. This is a quote from Michael J. Fox, and he says, Christopher Reeve wisely parsed the difference between optimism and hope. Unlike optimism, Christopher Reeve said, hope is the product of knowledge and the projection of where the knowledge can take us. And I find this super fascinating that Michael J. Fox quotes Christopher Reeve because he sees such a similarity. And then we put these two movies up against each other. And it's
Yeah.
what a weird coincidence and an amazing connection all at the same time.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is. All right, boys. Final vote. Gabe.
Wow. These were both really great documentaries, very touching and inspirational. It's hard to pick. I'm going to go with Still.
All right. Tom.
Okay, so I'm more of a Michael J. Fox fan than a Christopher Reeve fan, and so this is hard for me because I was like, just vote for Michael J. Fox. But in my filmmaker's heart, I have to admit that Superman is a better documentary. So
All right.
that was one.
Tom. Kyle.
Oh yeah, very difficult. I think very little separates these. I think if you're listening to this right now, you should watch both. There is no bad movie between these two or worse movie. But if I have to choose one, I'll choose Still.
All right. And Andrew.
This round would be Superman. I just randomly picked 2 rounds for each because both of these I couldn't honestly decide. I couldn't say one over the other, so I just voted straight down
I
the middle.
I will say this. I'm glad I'm not on your side this month because, yeah, this would have been difficult as well. I think you made the right choice. All right, let's move on to recommendations for this month, and we will start it off with Tom.
Hey, that's really awesome. So that's one reason why I took um, the writing category because I was worried someone was going to steal my pick from me. So, because we could have very easily slotted this movie in against either one of these, and I think we'd have a pretty close um, uh, show either way. And so my recommendation is for the documentary Pee Wee as Himself. And it's the story of Paul Rubens. And did I steal someone's?
Nope. It's a great documentary.
It's a really great documentary. And it deals a lot with uh, this star that rocketed to fame in the 80s. And then is rather than health problems, he has legal issues, which pale in comparison to what Michael and Christopher are going through. But it's an amazing, just a really great documentary. You should really watch it. It's very, very funny. Paul Rubens is such he is such a fascinating interview subject. He's coy, he's funny. He is constantly keeping the interviewer off balance. Right up to the very, and I honestly am talking within hours, the very bitter end, he keeps him off balance. And it's such a great documentary, and everyone should check it out. It's a bit longer. I think it's 3 hours plus because it's a two-parter. But there's no shortage of archival footage from Pee Wee, as you can imagine.
Nope.
So you should definitely check it out because it's very entertaining, very touching, and I loved it.
2 thumbs up.
All right.
Good choice.
Definitely.
Thanks, Tom. Kyle.
Okay, I'm going to recommend a movie I saw in the theaters not too long ago. Doesn't really have anything to do with these two movies, but I think it's still an important one and one I really enjoyed. I love the style of it. I love the way it's put together. I love its message. There's a lot of layers to it. And even though I didn't like this director's first movie, I was a big fan of Weapons, the Zach Krieger film. It's probably still in the theaters now, about like the mysterious disappearance of a bunch of children in a town. But it's obviously a movie that's not really about what it's about. There are a lot of layers and things to it to peel back, but it's really well put together, very tense, a lot of relatable themes to it. I really enjoyed it. So if you get a chance, watch Weapons.
Thank you, Kyle.
I
Andrew.
want to see that, by the way. That looks really good. So mine is going to be a Michael J. Fox movie. It's probably one of my favorites that I grew up with as a kid. Has some of the most amazing, I would say, gratuitous women scenes in this movie ever. Just your traditional 80s blonde, hot woman. It was, for a teenager and younger, just a perfect movie. But it is comedy. It is complete randomness. It's fun. There's some seriousness to it. And it kind of hits home a little bit because Michael J. Fox plays a character that's from Kansas. And so it's pretty cool. And that is Secret of My Success. And it is a great, fun, wild ride. And I highly recommend that you check it out.
It's such a good movie.
It's such a good movie. I will never forget the first time they show Christy and she leans over and takes the drink from the water fountain. It's embedded into my brain. Anyways, we can move on now.
I'm going to suggest a show that is related in a way to these movies that we watched tonight, in that it involves a celebrity and some serious health issues. There was a show on ABC called Emma and Bruce Willis, The Unexpected Journey. And it was a special that Diane Sawyer did because she was, I think she was pretty close with Bruce Willis. And on one level, they're kind of stumping for a book. His wife, Emma, has written a book about their journey, but it's also a very interesting watch, and it has a lot of the same elements as the films we watched for tonight's episode. A an extremely successful, highly famous actor comes down with, you know, a debilitating and just, um, you know, unimaginable disease, and he's basically gone out of the spotlight since then. And I think his his health has been declining very quickly. He doesn't make any real appearances in this thing, and you know, I understand why. You know, it's something he's probably not comfortable with, or his family's not comfortable with it. But the through line here again is, you know, the women and the family are around him are really strong, and they're really supportive. His wife is supporting him. His ex-wife Demi is supporting him. All of his children are supporting him, and it's really it falls into the same category as being, you know, tragic yet inspirational. So you can catch it. It's on Hulu right now. So if you have Hulu, you can catch it on Hulu, and it's only about an hour long. But like I said, it's very much like the movies we watched tonight. So I would recommend that.
I didn't know they made one for him. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I think it's early. You know, I assume we're probably going to get other documentaries about Bruce.
Sure.
But you know, this is it's an interesting look into something that I think we've all kind of wondered about a little bit, and you know, and so it gives us a little bit more detail on what his condition is and how he's doing. So yeah.
Thank you, Gabe. Uh, you're going to go with an hour, which is probably the shortest recommendation, and I'm going to go with what might be the longest recommendation to watch because it's like 8 episodes.
Oh,
45 minutes to an hour long, but it is a docu-series. And I want to preface this. I am, first of all, not a sports ball guy. I do dabble here and there. I do watch some, but I am not, got to watch every game type of guy. But this documentary took me back. And I will also say this, my brother loves the Dallas Cowboys. I hate the Dallas Cowboys simply because my brother loves the Dallas Cowboys. But I watched a documentary on Netflix, and it has a media mogul in it. It has a president in it. It also has Jimmy Johnson, Emmett Smith, Michael Irvin, Deion Sanders, Troy Aikman, and maybe still trying to figure this guy out. You know, we talked about selflessness a lot with the 2 documentaries that we did tonight. I think there's a lot of selfishness in this man, but it is very interesting. Jerry Jones, the owner of the Dallas Cowboys. This documentary is called America's Team, the Gambler and His Cowboys. It is beautifully shot. Absolutely beautifully shot. And it just took me back to the 90s when the Cowboys were on their Super Bowl kick. And Kyle's already heard this because we've talked about it, but damn, I forgot how much I loved Emmett Smith. And just seeing him in this documentary, it just made me like him even more. I really like that guy. But check it out. It is well worth the watch. It is, I would say, on par with the Chicago Bulls, Michael Jordan documentary. The name's escaping me right now. But it's really well done. So check out The Gambler and His Cowboys on Netflix.
Kind of a fun fact, somebody told me that girls try to avoid guys that wear Dallas Cowboy jerseys.
Oh, really?
It just demonstrates that there's no ring in their future.
Oh, wow. That's good.
That was
I
a good
like
one.
that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it is time to poke the monkey and find out who won tonight.
Action clean. Your winner by decision is still a Michael J. Fox movie.
Once again, I will say I'm glad I'm not sitting on that side of the podcast tonight, because this would have been very difficult. These are really two very well done films. These, they fill you with nostalgia, and then they hit you across the head with reality, and man, they just take you every which way. Yeah. So I'd recommend watching both of these films 100%. And I know you guys would do the same.
I'll watch these again.
The score was, sorry, I closed it 10-6, which was surprising to me. I thought it was going to be just a little bit closer, but that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
All right. Please leave us a review on whatever podcasting service you use. It helps us reach new listeners. If you like us, tell your friends. If you hate us, tell your enemies. You can contact us at cinesmack@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook, or search Cinesmack. If you want to listen to an unedited version of the show, you can catch us live on Twitch whenever we record an episode. I'm good at my job. We also now have a YouTube channel where you can watch the recorded Twitch videos. In October, we are celebrating Pope-tober with two movies that will battle it out to see who gets the white smoke. It's Conclave versus the Two Popes. For
Battle
Kyle,
for the soul of the world.
Gabe, Tom, Andrew, and myself, thanks for listening, and go catch a flick.
Science